Story 1. The Misaligned Shadows. The blackout happened at 02:18 hours, sudden and total. Every light in Sector D went dark simultaneously. Platform lights, emergency strips, exit signs, everything. I was midway through a safety inspection when the darkness dropped like a curtain. I activated my flashlight and swept the beam across the tunnel. The light caught the walls, the support beams, the tracks, and the shadows. They were wrong. My flashlight cast my shadow behind me toward the platform, exactly as it should, but there was another shadow extending ahead of me into the tunnel, as though a light source existed somewhere deep in the darkness, projecting my silhouette forward. I turned slowly, checking for secondary light sources. None, just my flashlight. But the second shadow remained, sharp and distinct, moving when I moved. I walked forward. My primary shadow shortened as I moved toward my light source. The second shadow, the impossible one, stayed the same length, always reaching ahead into the tunnel. And then I noticed the others. Dozens of shadows along the tunnel walls, cast by nothing, stretching forward and back in directions that defied any visible light. They weren't random. They were too organized, too deliberate. They looked like they belonged to people I couldn't see. My name is Elliot Brenner, and I am an infrastructure safety inspector for the Eastern Metro Transit Authority. I have been employed in this capacity for 8 years. My role involves conducting regular inspections of tunnel integrity, lighting systems, emergency exits, and structural stability across the network. I specialize in overnight inspections, when train traffic is minimal and I can access sections of the system that are otherwise occupied during operational hours. I am methodical. I am detail-oriented. I document everything. These qualities make me effective at my job. They also make it difficult for me to dismiss what I observed during the Sector D blackout as simple misperception. Sector D is a service corridor connecting the Red Line's eastern terminal to a maintenance depot approximately 900 feet west of Howell Station. It's not a passenger area. No platforms, no turnstiles, just a functional tunnel used for equipment transport and emergency routing. The tunnel is well lit under normal circumstances, industrial fluorescent fixtures every 20 feet, supplemented by LED emergency strips mounted along the floor. The lighting is redundant by design. A complete blackout in Sector D would require simultaneous failure of both the primary and backup systems, an event considered unlikely enough that it hadn't occurred in the tunnel's 40-year operational history. Until that Tuesday night. I entered Sector D at 02:10 hours through the western access door near the maintenance depot. My inspection checklist for the night included verifying the integrity of the lighting system, checking for water intrusion along the tunnel floor, and documenting any structural cracks or anomalies in the concrete. Standard work. Routine. I'd inspected Sector D a dozen times before. The tunnel was brightly lit when I entered. I noted this in my log. 02:10 hours. Primary and emergency lighting operational. No visible issues. I began walking eastward toward the Howell Station access point, conducting a visual scan of the walls and ceiling as I went. My flashlight was clipped to my belt, unused. I didn't need it. The fluorescent lights provided ample visibility. At 02:18 hours, the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a gradual dimming. Instant, total darkness. The kind of darkness you don't experience often in a modern city where light pollution seeps into every corner. This was absolute. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I unclipped my flashlight and activated it. The beam cut through the darkness, bright and focused. I swept it across the tunnel. The concrete walls appeared normal. The ceiling was intact. The tracks were clear. Everything looked exactly as it had moments before, except for the shadows. My flashlight cast a shadow behind me, my own silhouette, projected onto the wall and floor in the direction opposite my light source. This was expected, basic physics. But there was a second shadow extending ahead of me deeper into the tunnel. It was my shape, head, shoulders, torso, but oriented forward as though a light source existed somewhere ahead of me in the darkness, projecting my shadow back toward where I stood. I turned slowly, checking for secondary light sources, reflective surfaces, maintenance personnel with flashlights. Anything that could explain the second shadow. I saw nothing, just the beam of my flashlight and the darkness beyond it. I walked forward toward the eastern end of the tunnel. My primary shadow, the one cast by my flashlight, shortened and shifted as I moved. The second shadow, the impossible one, remained constant. It stretched ahead of me, always the same length, always pointing into the tunnel's depths. I stopped and radioed Control. Control, this is Brenner in Sector D. We have a complete power failure. Primary and emergency lighting are both out. Static, then a voice. Copy, Brenner. We're showing normal power levels for Sector D. Are you sure? I looked around at the darkness. I'm sure. I'm standing in total blackout. Can you check the breaker? Stand by. I waited, flashlight held steady. The silence was oppressive. Tunnels are never truly silent. There's always the hum of ventilation, the distant rumble of trains, the ambient noise of a functioning system. But Sector D was quiet, too quiet. Even the ventilation system seemed to have stopped. The radio crackled. Brenner, we've checked the system. All circuits for Sector D are showing active. Lighting should be operational. It's not. I'm in complete darkness except for my flashlight. A pause. We're dispatching a maintenance crew, ETA 15 minutes. Can you wait at your current position? Copy. I'll stay here. I lowered the radio and swept my flashlight across the tunnel again. That's when I noticed the other shadows. They were on the walls, cast at odd angles. Some extending along the floor, others climbing toward the ceiling. Dozens of them. Human-shaped silhouettes, each one sharp and distinct as though projected by a strong light source. But there was no light except my flashlight, and the shadows weren't mine. I walked toward the nearest shadow. It was on the left wall, about 5 feet ahead. A full-body silhouette, arms at the sides, head slightly tilted. I moved my flashlight beam across it. The shadow didn't change, didn't fade. My light passed over it without affecting it, as though the shadow existed independently of any illumination. I reached out and touched the wall where the shadow fell. The concrete was cold, smooth, normal, but the shadow remained superimposed on the surface like a projection. I stepped back and examined the tunnel more carefully. The shadows were everywhere. Some were small, child-sized. Others were tall, elongated. A few were positioned as though the person casting them had been mid-stride, frozen in motion. None of them moved. They were static, fixed to the walls and floor like photographs. I counted 12 shadows within the range of my flashlight. I took 10 steps forward and counted 12 more. Different positions, different angles, all of them human, all of them impossible. My radio crackled. Brenner, maintenance is en route. They're entering Sector D from the eastern access. You should see their lights in a few minutes. Copy. I turned toward the eastern end of the tunnel and waited. After 2 minutes, I saw light in the distance, 2 flashlight beams moving toward me. The maintenance crew. I felt a small measure of relief. At least I wouldn't be alone with the shadows anymore. The flashlights grew closer. I could see 2 figures now, both in maintenance coveralls, walking side by side. They stopped about 20 feet away. One of them called out, "Brenner, that you?" "Yeah, over here." They approached. I recognized them. Rick Paulson and Deb Cho, both experienced maintenance techs I'd worked with before. "What's the situation?" Rick asked. "Total blackout, and something's wrong with the shadows." Deb frowned. "The shadows?" I pointed my flashlight at the nearest wall. Look, they followed my beam. The shadow was there, clear and distinct. Rick walked over and examined it. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "A shadow, but there's nothing casting it." Rick studied the shadow, then swept his own flashlight around the area. "I don't see anything unusual." "What do you mean?" "The shadow's right there." Deb moved closer, shining her light on the same spot. "Brenner, I'm not seeing a shadow, just the wall." I stared at them. "You're telling me you don't see this?" I traced the outline of the shadow with my flashlight beam. "Head, shoulders, torso, it's right here." Rick and Deb exchanged a glance. Rick spoke carefully. "Brenner, maybe you should take a break. It's been a long shift." "I'm not imagining this. The shadow is real. There are dozens of them." Deb stepped forward, her tone gentle. "Let's get you out of the tunnel. We'll check the lighting system and file a report. But I think you should go topside, maybe get some air." I looked at the wall. The shadow was still there. I could see it as clearly as I could see my own hand. But Rick and Deb saw nothing. Either I was experiencing a hallucination, or they couldn't perceive what I was perceiving. Neither option was comforting. "Fine," I said. "Let's go." We walked toward the eastern access together. Rick and Deb led, their flashlights illuminating the path ahead. I followed, keeping my own beam aimed at the floor. I didn't look at the walls. I didn't want to see more shadows. I didn't want to confirm what I already suspected, that I was the only one who could see them. As we neared the access door, I glanced back one last time. The tunnel behind me was filled with shadows, not cast by the maintenance crew's flashlights, not cast by me. Just shadows standing in the darkness watching us leave. We exited through the access door into a brightly lit maintenance corridor. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the darkness of Sector D. Rick and Deb began discussing the power failure, speculating about circuit breakers and system diagnostics. I didn't participate. I was staring at the floor. My shadow was there, cast by the overhead lights extending behind me. Normal, expected. But there was a second shadow, faint, barely visible, stretching ahead of me down the corridor. I looked up. No secondary light source. Just the fluorescence above. I didn't mention it to Rick and Deb. I filled out my incident report. Power failure in Sector D, unable to determine cause, recommend full electrical inspection, and clocked out at 03:45 hours. I drove home in silence, the radio off, my mind replaying the images of those shadows. Over the next 3 days, I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Eye strain, fatigue, a trick of perception caused by sudden darkness and adrenaline. I researched optical illusions, afterimages, pareidolia. None of the explanations fit. The shadows had been too clear, too organized, too persistent. On the 4th day, I returned to work. I requested assignment to a different sector. My supervisor approved without question. I haven't been back to Sector D since, but the shadows followed me. I see them now in other tunnels. Faint, almost imperceptible, but present. They appear in my peripheral vision, silhouettes on the walls that vanish when I turn my head. I see them in the subway tunnels, in parking garages, in any space where light and darkness converge. They're always human-shaped, always still, always watching. I've stopped trying to explain them. I've stopped mentioning them to coworkers. I've learned that some things are only visible to those who've spent too long in the darkness, in places where light is an intrusion rather than the norm. The shadows aren't cast by anything in this world. They're cast by something else. Something that exists in the spaces between light sources, in the angles where illumination fails. And once you've seen them, they don't let you forget. They're always there at the edge of your vision, reminding you that the darkness isn't empty. It's full of things that left their shapes behind, pressed into the walls like memories. Some of them are old, decades, maybe centuries. Others are recent. A few, I think, haven't happened yet. They're shadows of people who will stand in those spots someday, casting silhouettes into a darkness they don't yet know exists. And when the lights go out, the shadows remain. They always remain. Long after the person who cast them has moved on, the shadow stays, waiting in the dark for someone like me to shine a light and see what shouldn't be seen. Story 2. The siren beneath the tracks. The alarm was faint at first, distant and rhythmic like a metronome buried under concrete. Dispatch said a fault indicator had triggered in Junction 7, deep maintenance level. No crews on site. Standard diagnostic run. I descended 3 flights of service stairs and entered the access tunnel. The alarm grew louder with every step, not the sharp electronic pulse of a modern system, but an old mechanical siren, the kind used in the 1960s for civil defense drills. Rotating tone, mournful. I followed the sound for 20 minutes, deeper into the junction than I'd ever been. The tunnel walls changed from modern concrete to old brick, slick with moisture. The siren was deafening now, filling the space, vibrating in my chest. I found the source, an ancient emergency panel mounted on a brick wall covered in decades of grime. The panel was open, the wiring inside was cut, severed cleanly, the ends corroded with age. The siren should have been silent, dead. But it screamed, endlessly, impossibly, and when I reached out to touch the panel, the sound didn't come from the speaker. It came from behind the wall. From something deep inside the infrastructure, something that had been making that sound long before the panel was installed. And it knew I was there. My name is Samuel Voss, and I am a systems technician for the Central Underground Transit Authority, specializing in electrical diagnostics and alarm system maintenance. I have been employed in this capacity for 14 years. I am responsible for responding to system alerts, identifying faults, and ensuring that all safety and emergency notification systems remain operational. I am trained to troubleshoot circuit failures, sensor malfunctions, and communication breakdowns. I am not trained to troubleshoot sounds that have no source. The call came through at 0247 hours on a Thursday morning. Dispatch radioed me with a routine fault alert. Junction 7, deep maintenance level. Alarm system indicating continuous activation. No crews were scheduled in that sector, no trains were passing through. The system flagged it as a potential sensor glitch, common enough in the older sections of the network where outdated equipment occasionally misfires. I was on site within 10 minutes, entering through the primary service access at Midtown Station. Junction 7 is one of the oldest sections of the transit system, constructed in the early 1960s when the network was first expanded beyond the city core. The junction sits 3 levels below the operational platforms, accessible only through a series of narrow service stairs and maintenance corridors. It's a convergence point where multiple track lines intersect, surrounded by utility tunnels, cable conduits, and abandoned infrastructure from earlier construction phases. It's not a place most technicians visit regularly. The equipment down there is largely obsolete, maintained only to the extent required by safety code. I descended the service stairs, each flight taking me deeper into the system's substructure. The air grew cooler and damper. The walls transitioned from painted concrete to bare brick, water stains streaking the surface. The lighting was sparse. Incandescent bulbs spaced every 30 feet, many of them burned out. I used my flashlight to supplement the dim illumination. At the base of the 3rd stairwell, I entered the Junction 7 access corridor. The fault alert had indicated alarm panel J7-04, located approximately 400 feet into the corridor. I checked my handheld diagnostic unit. The panel was still registering as active, the alarm signal transmitting continuously. As I walked, I became aware of the sound. It was faint at first, a low rhythmic pulse barely audible over the hum of distant ventilation fans. I stopped and listened. The sound was regular, mechanical, a siren, not the sharp electronic tone of a modern alert system, but the deep, rotating wail of an old civil defense siren, the kind installed in the 1960s for air raid warnings, designed to be heard across entire neighborhoods. I continued forward. The sound grew louder, more distinct. The corridor curved gently to the left, following the contour of the track junction above. The brick walls were slick with condensation, the floor uneven and cracked. Overhead, I could see the tangle of old wiring and piping, most of it disused, left in place when newer systems were installed. At approximately 300 feet, the siren was loud enough to feel. It vibrated in my chest, a physical pressure that made it difficult to focus. I checked my diagnostic unit again. Alarm panel J7-04 was still ahead, another 100 feet or so. The signal was strong, continuous, no fluctuation. I reached the panel at 0318 hours. It was mounted on the left wall, a gray metal box about 2 feet square labeled in faded stencil. Emergency Alarm System, Panel J7-04, installed 1967. The panel door was ajar, hanging slightly open on rusted hinges. I pulled it fully open and shone my flashlight inside. The wiring was old, cloth-insulated cables, brittle and discolored. The alarm unit itself was a mechanical device, a rotating siren driven by a small motor. The motor was disconnected. The wires leading to it had been severed, the ends corroded and frayed. The panel had been inactive for years, possibly decades, but the siren was still sounding, louder than ever. I stepped back and looked at the panel, then at the surrounding area. The sound wasn't coming from the panel, it was coming from beyond it, from behind the wall. I pressed my ear against the brick. The siren was there, deep inside the structure, reverberating through the masonry. It sounded distant but immense, as though the source were much larger than the small alarm unit in the panel. I radioed dispatch. Control, this is Voss. I'm at panel J7-04. The unit is non-functional, wiring is severed, motor is dead, but I'm still hearing the alarm. It's coming from inside the wall. A pause. Inside the wall? That doesn't make sense, Voss. I know, but that's where the sound is coming from. Can you trace the wiring? See if there's a secondary unit connected? I'll try. I examined the wiring inside the panel more carefully. The main power line ran up through a conduit into the ceiling, connecting to the central alarm circuit. I followed the conduit with my flashlight. It extended about 10 feet along the ceiling before disappearing into a junction box. I walked to the junction box and opened it. The connections inside were intact, but the line leading from the box went into the wall, into the brick itself, through a hole that looked like it had been chiseled decades ago. I followed the wall, tracing the path of the conduit by sound. The siren was loudest at a section of wall about 20 feet past the panel. The bricks here were older, darker, the mortar crumbling in places. I knelt and examined the base of the wall. There was a gap, a small opening where several bricks had been removed or had fallen away. The gap was maybe 8 inches wide, just large enough to shine a flashlight through. I aimed my light into the gap. Beyond the wall was a space, not a room exactly, more like a void. The flashlight beam didn't reach the far side, just darkness stretching away into the unseen. And in that darkness I could see something, a shape, large, metallic, rotating slowly. It was a siren, an enormous civil defense siren, the kind mounted on rooftops or poles in the 1950s and 60s. It was maybe 6 feet tall. The horn facing away from me, the motor at its base turning steadily. The siren rotated, the wail rising and falling as the horn swept past my position. But that was impossible. The siren was inside the wall. Inside the infrastructure, there was no room for something that large. The space behind the wall should have been filled with earth, with foundation, with the city's underground geology, not a void, not a siren. I pulled back from the gap and stood up, my heart rate elevated. I radioed dispatch again. Control, I need you to pull up the architectural plans for Junction 7, specifically the area around alarm panel J7-04. I need to know what's behind this wall. Stand by. I waited, listening to the siren. It continued without pause, the sound cycling through its mechanical rhythm. I counted the cycles, 10 seconds of rising tone, 10 seconds of falling tone, 1 second of silence, then repeat, over and over. The radio crackled. Voss, we've got the plans. The wall you're describing is an exterior foundation wall. Behind it should be compacted earth and the original excavation boundary from the 1960s. There's no room back there, no void. I'm looking at a void right now, and there's a siren inside it. A long pause. Voss, are you sure you're at panel J7-04? Positive. I'm looking at the panel label right now. Another pause. We're going to send a supervisor down. Don't enter any confined spaces. Just wait there. Copy. I stood in the corridor, flashlight in hand, staring at the gap in the wall. The siren continued. I checked my watch. 03:34 hours. I'd been down here for 47 minutes. It felt longer. At 03:52 hours, I heard footsteps. Supervisor Alan Grant appeared around the curve of the corridor, his own flashlight sweeping the walls. He was in his late 50s, a veteran technician who'd worked the system longer than I'd been alive. "What have you got, Sam?" he asked. I gestured to the gap in the wall. "There's a space behind this wall, and a siren inside it. Old civil defense unit, still active." Alan walked over and knelt by the gap. He shone his flashlight through, just as I had. He was silent for a long time. "You see it?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I see it." He stood up and examined the wall, running his hand over the bricks. This section of the junction was built in '67 during the second expansion. Before that, this was just open excavation, part of the original subway construction in the '50s. So where did the void come from? I don't know. Voids don't just appear. They're either intentional, like a utility chase or a drainage cavity, or they're the result of structural failure. But the plans don't show anything like this. And the siren? Alan shook his head. Civil defense sirens were installed all over the city in the '60s. Most of them were decommissioned in the '80s. A few are still up on roofs, but they're inactive. I've never heard of one being installed inside the infrastructure. Could it have been left here during construction, walled in by accident? Maybe. But it's still powered, still running. How? I didn't have an answer. Alan radioed dispatch. "Control, this is Grant. We have a situation at Junction 7. I'm requesting a structural engineer and a hazmat team. We need to breach this wall and assess what's behind it." "Copy, Grant. ETA 1 hour." We waited in the corridor. The siren continued, relentless, filling the space with its mechanical wail. After a while, I stopped hearing it as a sound and started feeling it as a presence. Something alive, something aware. At 04:47 hours, the engineer arrived with a 3-person crew. They set up portable lights and began assessing the wall. The engineer, a woman named Dr. Kelsey Marsh, took measurements and reviewed the architectural plans on a tablet. "This wall is load-bearing," she said. "We can't just tear it down. We'll need to create a controlled access point." She directed the crew to remove a section of bricks near the gap, widening the opening to about 3 feet. It took 20 minutes. When the opening was large enough, Dr. Marsh shone a high-powered spotlight through. The void was larger than I'd thought, maybe 30 feet deep, 20 feet wide. The siren sat in the center, bolted to a steel frame that was itself anchored to nothing. The frame appeared to be freestanding, surrounded by empty space. There was no floor beneath it, just darkness. No walls on either side. Just the void. Dr. Marsh stared at the scene, her expression unreadable. "This shouldn't exist," she said. "Can we shut it off?" Alan asked. "I don't know. There's no visible power source." One of the crew members, a young man named Torres, volunteered to enter the void and investigate. He put on a safety harness, clipped to a rope held by the rest of the crew, and climbed through the opening. I watched him move toward the siren. His flashlight beam swept across the void, illuminating nothing but empty space. He reached the siren and examined the motor at its base. "There's no power line," he called back. "No wiring. The motor's running, but there's nothing feeding it." "Check the mounting frame," Dr. Marsh instructed. Torres inspected the steel frame. "The frame's bolted to, I don't know what. It's not attached to anything I can see, it's just here." He reached out and touched the siren housing. The moment his hand made contact, the siren stopped. The silence was immediate and total. After nearly 2 hours of continuous noise, the absence of sound was almost painful. We all stood motionless, waiting. Torres pulled his hand back. The siren resumed, the wail building from silence to full volume in seconds. "It responds to contact," Torres said. "Like it's aware." Dr. Marsh pulled him back. "Get out of there, now!" Torres climbed out of the void, and the crew sealed the opening with temporary plywood. The siren continued, muffled now but still audible. Dr. Marsh filed a report recommending permanent sealing of the void and decommissioning of the area. The report was approved. 3 days later, a construction crew filled the void with concrete, pumping it through the opening until the entire space was solidified. The siren's sound faded as the concrete set, eventually disappearing entirely. I was reassigned to a different sector. I haven't been back to Junction 7 since, but I still hear the siren sometimes. Late at night, when the city is quiet, I hear it in the distance, faint, rhythmic, relentless. I hear it in my apartment, in my car, in the tunnels where I work. It's always there, just below the threshold of conscious awareness, a sound that doesn't need a source because it's not a sound anymore. It's something else, a presence, a reminder. Some alarms aren't meant to warn us of danger. They're meant to mark territory, to announce that something is there, has always been there, will always be there, no matter how much concrete we pour or how many walls we build. The siren beneath the tracks was never installed. It was never built. It was always there, waiting in the void, sounding its call into the darkness. And now that I've heard it, I can't unhear it. It's part of me now, a frequency I can't escape. And sometimes, when I press my ear against the walls of the tunnels I inspect, I hear it clearly, deep inside the infrastructure, still sounding, still calling, waiting for someone else to find it and realize that some things don't need power to run. They just need someone to listen. Story 3. The Duplicate Badge. I was conducting a routine security check at the north entrance when the scanner flagged a duplicate entry. 2 active badges with my credentials. Badge number 8834-M, issued to Samuel Myers. My badge. The system showed both badges currently in use within the facility. One at my location, one in sub-level 4. I looked down at my badge, clipped to my uniform. It was there, real, solid. I radioed control. "I need confirmation of my position. The system is showing I'm in 2 places. Dispatch checked. "Confirmed, Myers. You're showing at the north entrance and in sub-level 4 simultaneously. Do you have your badge?" I held it up to my radio. "Right here." A pause. "We're dispatching a team to sub-level 4. Stay where you are." I stayed, but I kept looking at the security monitor. The feed from sub-level 4 showed a figure in a security uniform walking the corridor, badge clearly visible on the chest. 8834-M, same number. Same name. The figure stopped, turned, and looked directly at the camera. I couldn't see the face clearly. The resolution was low, but the posture was mine. The walk was mine. And when the figure raised its hand and waved at the camera, I felt my own hand twitch, as though some part of me remembered making that gesture. My name is Samuel Myers, and I am a transit security officer for the Riverside Metro Authority. I have worked in this role for 6 years. My employee ID is 8834-M. My badge is magnetically encoded with my biometric data and clearance level. The badge is unique. There is no duplicate. There should be no duplicate. I discovered the duplicate during a routine security sweep at 0134 hours on a Friday morning. I was stationed at the North Entrance checkpoint, conducting identity verification for maintenance crews entering the facility. The checkpoint uses a badge scanner integrated with the facility-wide security system. When an employee scans their badge, the system logs their location, verifies their clearance, and displays their active status on the monitoring terminal. At 0134 hours, I scanned my own badge to log my position, as required every 30 minutes. The scanner beeped. The terminal displayed an alert. Duplicate entry detected, badge 8834-M. Samuel Myers, active locations. North Entrance checkpoint, current. Sub-level 4, corridor 3-B. Logged 0122 hours. I stared at the screen. I'd been at the North Entrance since my shift started at 2200 hours. I hadn't left the checkpoint. I hadn't gone to sub-level 4. I hadn't loaned my badge to anyone. The badge was clipped to my uniform where it had been all night. I radioed control. Control, this is Myers at North Entrance. The system is flagging a duplicate badge entry. My badge is showing active in 2 locations. The dispatcher responded immediately. Stand by, Myers. I waited. The terminal continued to display both locations, North Entrance and Sub-Level 4. The timestamp for the Sub-Level 4 entry updated every few seconds, indicating active movement. The dispatcher came back. Myers, we're showing the same thing on our end. Your badge is logged at 2 locations simultaneously. Do you have your badge in your possession? I unclipped the badge and held it up as though the dispatcher could see it through the radio. Affirmative. Badge is here. Copy. We're dispatching Officer Trent to Sub-Level 4 to investigate. Stay at your position. Copy. I clipped my badge back onto my uniform and pulled up the security camera feed for Sub-Level 4 on my terminal. Sub-Level 4 is a restricted maintenance area, accessible only to authorized personnel with Level 2 clearance or higher. I have Level 2 clearance. The corridors down there are narrow, lined with equipment lockers and utility panels. The lighting is dim. The cameras are older models with lower resolution. Camera 4-07 covered corridor 3-B. I selected the feed and watched. A figure was walking down the corridor. Security uniform, dark pants, navy jacket, equipment belt. A badge was visible on the chest. I zoomed the camera as much as the system allowed. The badge number was partially visible, 8834-M. My badge number. The figure walked with a steady, measured pace. The gait was familiar. I've seen myself on security footage before, during training reviews, incident playbacks. I know how I move. The figure moved the same way. The figure stopped and turned toward the camera. The face was partially obscured by the camera angle and the low resolution, but the build was right. The posture was right. The figure raised one hand and waved at the camera, a slow, deliberate gesture. I felt my own hand twitch. Not consciously, not intentionally. just a faint, involuntary movement, as though my body remembered making that gesture, even though I was standing at the north entrance checkpoint nowhere near sub-level 4. The figure turned and continued walking, disappearing around a corner. I switched to camera 4-09, which covered the adjacent corridor. The figure appeared again, walking steadily. I tracked it through 3 more cameras. It moved with purpose, checking doors, pausing at equipment panels, conducting what looked like a standard security patrol. Exactly the kind of patrol I would conduct. At 01:47 hours, Officer Trent radioed. "Control, Trent here. I'm entering sub-level 4 now. Myers, you copy?" I keyed my radio. "Copy, Trent. I'm watching on the cameras. The subject is in corridor 3-D, heading toward the east stairwell." "Copy. I'll intercept." I watched camera 4-12, which covered the east stairwell entrance. Officer Trent appeared in the frame, moving cautiously, one hand on his radio, the other near his baton. He reached the stairwell door and stopped, looking around. The figure was gone. I switched to camera 4-11, which covered the stairwell itself. Empty. I cycled through the other sub-level 4 cameras, no sign of the figure. Trent radioed again. "Myers, I don't see anyone down here. The corridor's empty." I was watching the feed. The subject was right there 30 seconds ago. "Well, they're not here now. I'm going to do a full sweep. Stand by." I watched the cameras as Trent moved through sub-level 4, checking each corridor, each room. He found nothing. No other personnel. No sign of anyone having been there recently. At 02:03 hours, Trent radioed back. "Control, sub-level 4 is clear. No unauthorized personnel located. Recommend checking the badge system for a logging error." The dispatcher acknowledged. "Copy, Trent. Return to your station." I checked the security system terminal again. My badge was now showing only one active location, north entrance. The sub-level 4 entry had disappeared from the log. I pulled up the system's access history and searched for badge 8834-M. The log showed 01:22 hours, sub-level 4. Corridor 3-B, access granted. 01:34 hours, north entrance, access granted. 01:55 hours, sub-level 4 east stairwell, access logged. 02:03 hours, log entry deleted. System correction. The sub-level 4 entries had been flagged as errors and removed. According to the corrected log, I'd been at the north entrance the entire time. The duplicate entries were classified as a database glitch. But I'd seen the figure on camera. I'd watched it move through the corridors. I'd seen my badge number. I filed an incident report documenting the duplicate entry and the security footage. The report was reviewed by the shift supervisor, who marked it as resolved. Badge system glitch, no security breach, no further action required. 2 days later, I was back on shift, assigned to the central security hub. The hub monitors all facility cameras and access points from a single location. At 03:15 hours, I was reviewing the overnight access logs when I noticed an entry that didn't match my memory. Badge 8834-M. Samuel Myers, sub-level 4, equipment room 4-F. Access granted. 02:47 hours, I checked my own log. At 02:47 hours, I'd been in the security hub, conducting a routine camera check. I hadn't left the room. I pulled up the camera feed for equipment room 4-F at 02:47 hours. The footage showed a figure entering the room. Security uniform, same build. The figure moved to a storage locker, opened it, and removed something, a small box, maybe 6 inches square. The figure examined the box, then placed it in a jacket pocket and left the room. I zoomed the camera. The badge was visible, 8834-M. I checked the locker inventory system. Locker 4-F-12 was assigned to me. The locker was used for secure storage of confiscated items and evidence. The most recent entry showed item removed, 0247 hours, Samuel Myers, 8834-M. Item description: personal effects case number 2019-08, case number 2019-08. I pulled up the case file. It was from 5 years ago, before I'd started working at this facility. The case involved a lost and found item turned in by a passenger, a small metal box, contents unknown, never claimed. The box had been logged into evidence and stored in my locker when I was assigned the case upon my transfer to this facility. I didn't remember removing the box. I didn't remember going to equipment room 4-F. But the log said I had. The camera showed I had. I went to locker 4-F-12 and opened it. The box was gone. I searched my jacket pockets. Nothing. I searched my locker in the break room. Nothing. I checked the lost and found logs to see if the box had been returned. No record. I filed another incident report. This time, the supervisor called me into his office. "Sam, I'm concerned," he said. "You filed 2 reports in the last 3 days about badge anomalies and missing items. Are you feeling all right? Any stress? Any sleep issues?" "I'm fine," I said. "But someone is using my badge, or the system is logging actions I'm not taking." The IT team reviewed the system. There's no evidence of unauthorized access, no duplicate badges, no cloning. The system is functioning normally. "Then how do you explain the footage? I was in the security hub at 0247 hours. I couldn't have been in equipment room 4-F at the same time. The timestamp could be wrong, or you might have gone down there earlier in your shift and forgotten. It happens, Sam. Long overnight shifts can mess with your memory." I didn't argue, but I knew what I'd seen. I knew where I'd been. Over the next week, I started keeping my own log, a handwritten record of every action I took, every location I visited, every minute of my shift. I documented everything: timestamps, camera feeds, badge scans, and I kept finding discrepancies. The system would log me in locations I hadn't visited. Cameras would show me performing tasks I didn't remember doing. At 0115 hours, the system logged me accessing sub-level 2. At 0115 hours, I was in the break room on camera, drinking coffee. At 0342 hours, the system logged me at the south entrance. At 0342 hours, I was conducting a foot patrol on level 1, witnessed by a maintenance worker. I confronted the IT team. They ran diagnostics. They found nothing wrong. The badge system was functioning normally. The logs were accurate as far as the system was concerned. But I knew the truth. There were 2 of me. One version moving through the facility, performing security duties, accessing restricted areas. Another version, me, the one I recognized as myself, following my own routine, unaware of what the other was doing. Except I was becoming aware. Sometimes when I walked through a corridor, I'd feel a strange familiarity, as though I'd been there recently, even though I knew I hadn't. Sometimes when I scanned my badge, I'd feel a faint echo, a doubling, as though the action were happening twice simultaneously. And sometimes late in my shift, I'd see him on the cameras, the other me, walking the same routes I walked, checking the same doors I checked, always just out of direct sight, always in a place I'd been or was about to be. 3 weeks after the first duplicate entry, I requested a transfer to a different facility. The request was denied. Staffing shortages, they needed me here. I considered resigning. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't matter, that wherever I went, the other me would follow, that my badge, my identity, my presence in the system had been copied somehow, duplicated, split, and that the other version, whatever it was becoming more real than I was. I still work here, I still conduct my patrols, I still file my reports, but I've stopped looking at the cameras, I've stopped checking the access logs. Because every time I do, I see evidence of a version of myself I can't control. A version that moves through the facility when I'm not looking. A version that uses my badge, my clearance, my identity to go places I'll never see and do things I'll never remember. Some duplicates aren't copies, they're replacements. And the longer I stay here, the more I wonder which version is the original and which is the echo. The badge doesn't know. The system doesn't know. And I'm starting to suspect I don't know either, because when I look in the mirror now, I see myself, but I also see a faint second image slightly out of phase, moving just a fraction of a second behind. And I don't know which one I'm supposed to be watching. Story 4. The platform without an exit. The passenger approached me at 03:22 hours, disoriented, asking for directions. Platform 18, he said. He needed to get to platform 18. I checked my terminal. There was no platform 18 in this station, only platforms 1 through 16. You must be confused, I told him. But he insisted, pulling out a transit pass with platform 18 printed clearly on the departure line. I radioed control. They confirmed no platform 18. I offered to escort him to the correct platform. He agreed. We descended a service stairwell I'd used 1,000 times, but the stairs kept going, down, past sub-level 2, past sub-level 3. The lighting changed. Older fixtures, incandescent bulbs instead of LEDs. We reached a platform. The sign above us read, Platform 18. The passenger thanked me and walked toward the edge. I looked for the exit stairwell. There wasn't one. No stairs, no escalators, no doors. Just the platform extending into a tunnel that curved into darkness I'd never seen mapped. I turned to ask the passenger how he'd planned to leave, but he was gone. The platform was empty. And when I tried to retrace my steps, the stairwell we'd descended was no longer there. Just a blank wall where the entrance should have been. My name is Trevor Ashford, and I am a transit police officer assigned to Central Metro Station. I have held this position for 9 years. My duties include passenger assistance, safety enforcement, and emergency response across all 16 platforms within the station. I know every platform, every exit, every stairwell and service corridor. I know the layout as well as I know my own apartment. I can navigate the station in complete darkness if necessary. This knowledge makes what happened 3 nights ago particularly difficult to reconcile. Central Metro Station is one of the largest transit hubs in the system, serving 4 separate lines with a total of 16 platforms arranged across 3 sub-levels. Platforms 1 through 6 are on sub-level 1, serving the red and blue lines. Platforms 7 through 12 are on sub-level 2, serving the green line. Platforms 13 through 16 are on sub-level 3, serving the orange line and express services. The layout is logical, well-marked, and consistent with the station maps posted throughout the facility. There is no Platform 18. The incident began at 03:22 hours, during the quietest hours of the overnight shift. Passenger traffic at that hour is minimal. A few stragglers from late-night bars, hospital workers ending their shifts, occasionally someone who fell asleep on a train and rode it to the end of the line. I was conducting a routine patrol on sub-level 2 when I encountered a male passenger, approximately 50 years old, standing near the central information board with a confused expression. He was well-dressed, business casual, carrying a leather briefcase, and appeared sober and coherent. Not the typical profile of someone lost or disoriented at 3 a.m. I approached. "Can I help you find something?" He looked relieved to see me. "Yes, thank you. I'm trying to get to Platform 18. I've been walking in circles for 20 minutes. "Platform 18? I said. Sir, this station only has 16 platforms. Can I see your ticket? He reached into his jacket and produced a transit pass, a standard electronic card. He held it toward the information board scanner. The board displayed his ticket information. Departure, Platform 18. Destination, Millbrook Station. Time 03:45 hours. I stared at the display. Platform 18. The system had printed it clearly, but Platform 18 didn't exist. There must be an error with your ticket, I said. Let me contact Control and get this sorted out. I radioed the control center. Control, this is Ashford on sub-level 2. I have a passenger with a ticket showing departure from Platform 18. Can you verify? The dispatcher responded after a brief pause. Ashford, there is no Platform 18 in Central Metro. The passenger's ticket must be misprinted. Direct them to customer service for a refund. Copy. I turned to the passenger. Sir, there's been an error with your ticket. Platform 18 doesn't exist in this station. I can escort you to customer service, and they'll issue a corrected ticket. The passenger frowned. Platform 18 absolutely exists. I've used it before. It's down on the lowest level, past the express platforms. The lowest level is sub-level 3, and it only has platforms 13 through 16. There's nothing beyond that. He shook his head, frustrated but not angry. I'm telling you, it's there. I've taken the train from Platform 18 at least a dozen times. It serves the Millbrook route. I knew the system's routes. There was no Millbrook station, but the passenger seemed genuinely convinced, and his ticket, somehow, supported his claim. I made a decision. All right, I'll escort you down to sub-level 3 and we'll sort this out. Follow me. We descended the central stairwell from sub-level 2 to sub-level 3. The stairwell is wide, well lit, with clear signage at each landing. I've used it hundreds of times. It's a straightforward descent, 2 flights, 1 landing, then the sub-level 3 platform area. But that night, the stairs continued. We passed the sub-level 3 landing. The sign was there, sub-level 3. Platforms 13-16, but the stairs kept going downward. Another flight, another landing. The lighting changed subtly. The modern LED fixtures transitioned to older incandescent bulbs, casting a warmer, dimmer glow. I stopped at the next landing and looked back up. The stairwell extended above us, normal and familiar. I looked down. More stairs descending into dimness. This doesn't seem right, I said. The passenger looked at me with mild confusion. We're almost there. 1 more level. There is no other level. There is. Platform 18 is just ahead. Against my better judgment, I continued descending. The stairs ended at a narrow corridor, maybe 6 feet wide, with concrete walls and a low ceiling. The lighting was minimal, single bulbs spaced every 20 feet. The air was cooler here and carried a faint smell of oil and stale water. At the end of the corridor was an open archway. Beyond it, I could see a platform. We stepped through the archway onto the platform. It was smaller than the modern platforms, maybe 50 feet long, 10 feet wide. The construction was old. Brick walls, a vaulted ceiling supported by riveted steel beams, gas lamp fixtures that had been retrofitted with electric bulbs. The platform edge was marked with faded yellow paint. A single sign hung from the ceiling. Platform 18. The passenger smiled. See, I told you it existed. I looked around, trying to orient myself. The platform should not exist. There was no structural space for it. Sub-level 3 was the deepest level in the station, and it was already close to the water table. Another level down would be below the riverbed. I walked to the edge of the platform and looked at the tracks. They were old. Iron rails, heavily rusted. The wooden ties cracked and discolored. The tunnel extending from the platform was narrow, barely wide enough for a train. I couldn't see far into it. The curve of the tunnel obscured the view after about 30 feet. I turned back to the passenger. "When does your train arrive?" He checked his watch. "Should be here at 03:45 hours, about 10 minutes. "And where exactly does this train go?" "Millbrook Station?" "That's right, Millbrook. It's a small stop, end of the line. Not many people use it anymore." I'd worked for the Transit Authority for 9 years. I'd studied the system maps, the historical records, the route schedules. There was no Millbrook Station. There had never been a Millbrook Station. I radioed Control again. "Control, Ashford, I need you to verify something. Is there a station called Millbrook on any line in the system?" A pause. "Negative, Ashford. No station by that name. Are you having issues with a passenger?" "Not exactly. Stand by." I looked around the platform more carefully. There were benches, old wooden benches, worn and warped. A trash receptacle, overflowing with ancient newspapers. A vending machine, its glass cracked, the products inside unrecognizable. Everything looked decades out of date, as though the platform had been abandoned sometime in the 1960s or 70s and left to decay. But the lights were on, the sign was illuminated, and the passenger seemed to expect a train. I walked toward the archway we'd entered through, intending to retrace our steps. The archway was there, the corridor beyond it visible, but as I approached, I realized something was wrong. The corridor had changed. It was longer now, and instead of leading to the stairwell, it curved to the left, disappearing into darkness. I couldn't see the stairs. I stepped into the corridor and walked back the way we'd come. The corridor curved, then curved again. After 30 feet, it ended at a blank concrete wall. No stairwell, no exit. Just a wall. I walked back to the platform. The passenger was sitting on one of the benches reading a newspaper he'd pulled from his briefcase. The newspaper was yellowed, brittle. I could see the date printed at the top, September 14th, 1973. "Sir," I said, "how did you get down here?" He looked up from the paper. "Same as always. Down the stairs." "There are no stairs. The corridor ends at a wall." He frowned. "That doesn't make sense. How are people supposed to leave?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." I returned to the corridor and searched more carefully. The walls were solid concrete. No doors, no panels, no hidden exits. I walked the entire length, running my hands over the surface, looking for seams or gaps. Nothing. I went back to the archway and examined it. The arch was stone, old and weathered, the mortar crumbling in places. Carved into the keystone at the top of the arch was a phrase in Latin. "Quod descendit non ascendit." I didn't know Latin, but I could guess the meaning. Something about descending and not ascending. What goes down doesn't go up, or what descends does not ascend. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. I walked back onto the platform. "Sir, I think we need to leave, now." The passenger looked at his watch. "The train will be here in 5 minutes. I can't miss it. There's no exit. The stairwell is gone." He looked at me calmly. "Then how did we get here?" I didn't have an answer. At 03:45 hours, I heard a sound, a distant rumble growing louder, the unmistakable sound of a train approaching. I looked into the tunnel. The darkness seemed to lighten slightly, as though illuminated by an approaching headlight. The rumble grew into a roar, echoing through the confined space. The train emerged from the tunnel. It was old. An antique passenger car, boxy and riveted, painted in faded green and cream. The kind of train that hadn't been in service since the 1950s. The windows were dark. The wheels screeched against the rusted rails as the train slowed. The train stopped. The doors opened with a mechanical clunk. Inside, the car was dimly lit. I could see rows of seats, worn fabric, grab rails, and passengers. Maybe a dozen people sitting in various positions, all of them still staring ahead. None of them moved. None of them looked toward the open doors. The passenger beside me stood up, picked up his briefcase, and walked toward the train. "Wait," I said, "don't get on that train." He paused and looked back at me. "This is my train. I have to go." "Where does it go, really?" He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "You'll find out eventually. Everyone on this platform does." He boarded the train. The doors closed. The train began to move, accelerating into the tunnel. Within seconds, it disappeared around the curve, the sound fading into silence. I was alone on the platform. I walked back to the archway and tried the corridor again. Still a dead end. I searched for any other exit, a maintenance door, an emergency ladder, anything. There was nothing. I sat down on one of the benches and tried to think rationally. I was in a place that shouldn't exist, reached by a stairwell that had disappeared. A train had arrived and departed, serving a station that wasn't on any map. And I had no way to leave. I radioed Control. "Control, Ashford, I need immediate assistance. I'm trapped in a section of the station I can't identify. Requesting emergency extraction team." Static. Then, "Ashford, your signal is very weak. Can you confirm your location?" "I'm on a platform marked as Platform 18. I accessed it via the central stairwell, but the stairwell is no longer there." "Ashford, there is no Platform 18. Are you injured? Do you need medical assistance?" "I'm not injured. I'm trapped. I need someone to find me." "We're dispatching a search team. Stay where you are." I waited. 1 hour. 2 hours. No one came. At 05:17 hours, I heard the train again, the distant rumble growing louder. The same antique car emerged from the tunnel and stopped at the platform. The doors opened. Inside, the car was fuller now. More passengers, all of them sitting motionless, staring ahead. I recognized one of them. The businessman with the briefcase. He was in the third row, his briefcase on his lap, his eyes fixed on the seat in front of him. I didn't board. The doors closed. The train departed. Over the next hours, days, I'm not sure anymore, my watch stopped working. I've counted 11 trains. Each one carries more passengers. Each one leaves without me. I've tried boarding. I've tried forcing the doors. They don't respond to me. It's as though I'm not meant to leave that way. I've searched every inch of this platform. There are no other exits. The corridor remains a dead end. The archway is the only way on or off, and it leads nowhere. I still radio Control periodically. They respond, but the conversations are increasingly confused. They insist they can't locate me. They insist Platform 18 doesn't exist. They ask if I'm sure I'm in Central Metro Station. I'm not sure of anything anymore. The platform is always lit. The trains keep coming, and sometimes, when I sit on the benches and close my eyes, I can hear footsteps. New arrivals, escorted by officers who think they're helping, descending stairs that only go down, passing through an archway that only opens in one direction. I know now what the Latin phrase means. What descends does not ascend. Once you've come down here, once you've crossed through that arch, there's no going back up. The exit doesn't exist because you're not meant to leave. You're meant to wait, to sit on the benches, to watch the trains arrive and depart until eventually you understand that boarding isn't a choice. It's an inevitability. I'm still waiting, still sitting. Still hoping that the next train will open its doors for me, because staying on this platform forever is worse than whatever destination those trains serve. Some platforms aren't meant for departures. They're meant for arrivals. And once you arrive, once you step across that threshold, you become part of the station's geography. A fixture. A passenger waiting for a train that will eventually take you somewhere no map can show. Down a line that doesn't end so much as fade into darkness, carrying people who forgot they were going anywhere at all. Story 5, the lockdown drill that wasn't scheduled. The alarm started at 0403 hours. A sharp electronic pulse followed by the automated voice. Attention! Emergency lockdown initiated. All personnel remain in current location. Do not attempt to exit the facility. I was in Storage Corridor D conducting an equipment inventory. Lockdown drills were scheduled weeks in advance. This wasn't on the schedule. I radioed Control. Control Ashford, confirm lockdown drill status. Static. Then, negative Ashford, no drill scheduled. This is not an authorized lockdown. The automated voice continued. Lockdown in effect. Facility sealed. Do not approach exits. I tried the corridor door. Locked. Electronic deadbolt engaged. I looked through the wire-reinforced window. The corridor beyond was empty, fluorescent lights flickering. Then I heard it, a sound from deeper in the storage area, beyond the shelving units. Metal scraping against concrete. Slow, deliberate. Something large dragging itself across the floor. The automated voice spoke again, but the script had changed. Lockdown in effect. Remain silent. Do not move. It is listening. My name is Marcus Donnelly, and I am a security systems technician for the Northern Transit Authority. I have been employed in this role for 11 years. My responsibilities include maintaining electronic security systems, conducting equipment inventories, and responding to system alerts. I am familiar with all emergency protocols, including lockdown procedures. Lockdowns are rare, typically reserved for active threats, hazardous material incidents, or structural emergencies. They are never initiated without authorization from the Central Command Center. They are always scheduled if they are drills. The lockdown that occurred 3 nights ago was not scheduled. It was not authorized, and according to every system diagnostic I've run since, it never happened. I was in Storage Corridor D at 0403 hours conducting a quarterly inventory of backup radio equipment. Storage Corridor D is located on Sublevel 2, accessible only via keycard and biometric scan. The corridor is approximately 80 feet long, lined with industrial shelving units containing spare equipment, tools, and archived hardware. The corridor has 1 entrance, 1 exit, both controlled by electronic locks tied to the facility's central security system. At 0403 hours, the overhead speakers activated. A sharp alarm tone, 3 short pulses, followed by an automated voice. Attention! Emergency lockdown initiated. All personnel remain in current location. Do not attempt to exit the facility. I stopped what I was doing and looked up at the nearest speaker. Lockdown drills were always announced in advance, and they always occurred during day shifts when more personnel were present. An unscheduled lockdown at 4 a.m. made no sense. I pulled out my radio. Control. This is Donnelly in Storage Corridor D. Confirm lockdown drill status. Static. Then after a long pause, Donnelly, this is Control. Stand by. Another pause, longer this time. Then, Donnelly, we're not showing any authorized lockdown. This is not a scheduled drill. We did not initiate a lockdown. Then who did? Unknown. We're investigating. Can you access the corridor exit? I walked to the door and tried the handle. Locked. I swiped my key card. The reader blinked red. Access denied. Lockdown in effect. I tried my biometric scan, same result. Negative Control, I'm locked in. The system won't accept my credentials. Copy. We're attempting to override from here. Stand by. The automated voice spoke again. Lockdown in effect. Facility sealed. Do not approach exits. I looked through the wire-reinforced window in the door. The corridor beyond was empty. The fluorescent lights were flickering, a slow, irregular pulse that made the shadows jump and stretch. I'd never seen the lights do that before. I radioed Control again. Control, the corridor lights are malfunctioning and I'm still locked in. How long until you can override? Static. No response. Control, do you copy? More static. Then faintly beneath the static, I heard a voice. Not the dispatcher's voice. Something else. Distorted. Barely audible. I couldn't make out the words. I adjusted the radio frequency, trying to clear the interference. The static intensified, then cut out entirely. Dead air. I tried my cell phone. No signal. Not unusual in the sublevels where the concrete and steel infrastructure blocks most wireless signals. But the timing felt wrong. The automated voice spoke again, but the script had changed. Lockdown in effect, remain silent, do not move, it is listening. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. That wasn't standard lockdown protocol. The automated system had specific scripts programmed decades ago, never altered. The phrasing was wrong. The tone was wrong. I stood very still and listened. From somewhere deeper in the storage area, beyond the rows of shelving units, I heard a sound. Metal scraping against concrete, slow, rhythmic, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I turned toward the sound. The shelving units blocked my view. 10 rows of industrial racks, each one 8 feet tall, loaded with equipment. The sound was coming from the far end of the corridor near the back wall. "Hello," I called out. "Is someone there?" The scraping stopped. Silence. Then it resumed. Louder now. Closer. The rhythm was deliberate. Drag, pause, as though something were pulling itself forward, one laborious movement at a time. I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on the shelving units. The lighting flickered again, and in the brief darkness between pulses, I thought I saw movement. A shadow shifting between the racks. Tall. Elongated. The automated voice spoke again. "Do not run. Movement attracts attention." I stopped moving. My hand went instinctively to my radio, but I didn't transmit. If the system, or whatever was using the system, was telling me to stay still, I wasn't sure I wanted to test what would happen if I disobeyed. The scraping continued. I estimated it was now about 40 feet away, still obscured by the shelving units. I couldn't see what was making the sound, but I could hear it clearly. Metal on concrete, intermittent, patient. I slowly reached for my flashlight, clipped to my belt. The overhead lights were too erratic to rely on. I activated the flashlight and aimed it toward the sound. The beam cut through the flickering shadows, illuminating the corridor. I swept it across the shelving units, looking for the source of the sound. The scraping stopped again. I held the flashlight steady, beam fixed on the gap between 2 shelving units. Nothing, just empty floor, scattered dust, a few discarded cable ties. Then I heard breathing, not mine. Something else, deep, labored. The kind of breathing that comes with effort, with strain. It was close, maybe 20 feet away, but I still couldn't see anything. I took a step back. My heel hit the door. I was pressed against it now, nowhere left to retreat. The automated voice spoke again. "It is in the room. Do not look directly at it." I immediately looked down, focusing on the floor near my feet. My training, years of security protocols and emergency response, was screaming at me to maintain visual contact with a threat. But the voice, whatever it was, had given clear instructions, and some deep primal instinct told me to obey. The breathing grew louder. I could hear it moving now, not with the scraping sound, but with a wet, sliding noise, like something damp pulling itself across a surface. I kept my eyes on the floor. In my peripheral vision, I could see the flashlight beam still pointed toward the shelving units. The beam illuminated something, a shape, tall and irregular, moving slowly between the racks. I forced myself not to look up. The shape moved closer. I could see it in the edge of my vision. Dark, vaguely humanoid, but wrong in proportions. Too tall, too thin. Limbs that bent at joints that shouldn't exist. The automated voice spoke again, softer now, almost a whisper. "Close your eyes. It is directly in front of you." I closed my eyes. I heard the breathing inches from my face. I felt cold air, damp and rancid, washing over me. I smelled something metallic and organic, like rust mixed with decay. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stood frozen, eyes closed, waiting. The breathing continued for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. Then it receded. I heard the sliding sound again, moving away, back toward the shelving units. The automated voice spoke. "It is leaving. Remain still." I stayed motionless, eyes closed, listening. The sliding sound grew fainter. Then it stopped entirely. After a long silence, the automated voice spoke again. "Lockdown lifted. You may open your eyes." I opened my eyes slowly. The corridor was empty. The shelving units were undisturbed. The fluorescent lights had stopped flickering. They burned steady and bright now, as they always did. I looked at the door. The electronic lock was disengaged. The access panel glowed green. Access granted. I grabbed the handle and pulled the door open. The corridor beyond was normal, empty, well lit, silent. I stepped through and let the door close behind me. The lock engaged with a solid click. I stood in the corridor, breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. I pulled out my radio and tried control again. "Control, this is Donnelly. The lockdown has lifted. I'm exiting storage corridor D. Do you copy?" The response was immediate. "Copy, Donnelly. We've been trying to reach you for the last 15 minutes. Your radio cut out. Are you all right?" I'm fine. What happened with the lockdown?" "What lockdown?" "The automated lockdown that started at 0403 hours. You said you were investigating." A pause. "Donnelly, we have no record of a lockdown. The system shows normal operations all night. Did you experience a medical episode? Do you need assistance?" I looked back at the door to storage corridor D. The access panel was green, normal, no indication of a lockdown, no flashing alerts. "Negative, Control, I'm fine. I'll file a report when I return to the hub." "Copy. Let us know if you need anything." I walked back to the security hub and pulled up the system logs. I searched for any lockdown alerts, any automated announcements, any system anomalies at 0403 hours, nothing. The logs showed normal operations, no alerts, no lockdowns, no automated voice activations. I checked the audio recordings from the storage corridor speakers. The recordings showed silence, just ambient noise, no alarms, no voice. I sat at my workstation and tried to reconstruct what had happened. Hallucination, psychological break, carbon monoxide exposure. I considered all the rational explanations, but none of them fit. I'd heard the voice clearly. I'd felt the presence. I'd smelled the decay. And I'd obeyed the voice's instructions. I'd closed my eyes when it told me to. I'd stayed still when it told me not to move. And I was alive. I filed a vague incident report, equipment malfunction, temporary communications failure, and completed my shift. I didn't mention the voice. I didn't mention what I'd seen in my peripheral vision. I knew how it would sound. 3 nights later, I was assigned to the same storage corridor for another inventory check. I stood outside the door, keycard in hand, staring at the access panel. I didn't want to go inside, but my shift required it. Inventory was overdue. I had a job to do. I swiped my keycard. The panel blinked green, the lock disengaged. I pulled the door open and stepped inside. The corridor was normal. Bright lights, organized shelving, no sounds except the faint hum of the ventilation system. I conducted the inventory quickly, efficiently, eyes constantly scanning the aisles between the shelving units. I didn't see anything unusual. I didn't hear anything unusual. But when I reached the back wall, Near where the scraping sound had originated, I found something. Scratch marks, deep gouges in the concrete floor running in parallel lines as though something with metal appendages had dragged itself across the surface. The marks were fresh. The concrete dust around them was pale, recently exposed. I took a photo with my phone and left the corridor immediately. I haven't been back to Storage Corridor D since. I requested reassignment to surface-level duties. The request was denied, staffing shortages again. But I've been quietly skipping any assignments that involve sub-level 2. I don't know what the lockdown was. I don't know what was in that corridor with me. But I know the automated voice saved me. It gave me instructions, it told me how to survive, and that's what terrifies me the most. Because lockdown protocols are programmed for human threats. Fire, structural collapse, armed intruders. The automated system isn't designed to respond to something that slides between shelving units, something that breathes with effort, something that exists in the spaces where the lights flicker and the radio signals fail. But it did respond. It knew. It had a script for that situation. A script no one programmed. A script that emerged from the system itself or from something that learned how to use the system. And if the system knows that thing exists, if it has protocols for surviving an encounter with it, then that thing has been there before. It's happened before. And it will happen again. Some lockdowns aren't meant to keep threats out. They're meant to keep them in, to seal them away from the surface, from the operational levels, from the places where people live and work and pretend the infrastructure beneath their feet is just concrete and steel. But it's not. It's deeper than that. And some corridors, some storage areas, some sealed sections of the system are locked not because they're dangerous to enter, but because they're dangerous to leave. Because once you've been inside, once you've heard the voice and seen the shape and smelled the decay, you become part of the system's memory. A data point, a cautionary entry in a log file no one can access. And the next time the lockdown happens, and it will happen, the system will remember you. It will know your name. And when the automated voice speaks, it will speak directly to you because you've already been marked. You've already been seen. And closing your eyes won't help anymore. Story 6. The report filed in advance. I opened my locker at the end of shift, exhausted, ready to clock out. Inside, on top of my spare uniform, was a manila folder I didn't recognize. I pulled it out. The label read, Incident Report, Officer J. Walsh. Date, today's date. My name, today's date. I opened the folder. Inside was a completed incident report filled out in my handwriting. The report described events from my shift, a fall on Platform 7, a radio call I'd made at 0417 hours, a warning I'd issued to a maintenance worker about an electrical hazard. Every detail was accurate. Every timestamp matched my shift log. But I hadn't written this report. I hadn't filed anything. The report concluded with a final entry time-stamped at 0552 hours, 7 minutes from now. Officer Walsh observed structural anomaly in service tunnel 9-E. Entered tunnel for closer inspection. Officer did not exit. Search initiated at 0630 hours. Officer remains missing. My hands started shaking. I looked at my watch. 0545 hours. I had 7 minutes before the report said I would enter tunnel 9-E. 7 minutes before I would go missing. My name is Jonathan Walsh, and I am a senior security officer for the Harbor Metro Transit Authority. I have worked in this role for 17 years. I am methodical. I am reliable. I document everything, every incident, every anomaly, every minor detail of my shifts. Documentation is what keeps the system accountable. It's what separates chaos from order. 3 nights ago, I discovered a report I didn't write, a report that described a future I hadn't yet lived, And despite every rational instinct I possess, I followed it, because the alternative, believing I could change what was already written, felt more dangerous than letting it happen. Let me start at the beginning. My shift on Tuesday night was routine. I clocked in at 2200 hours, reviewed the transition log, and began my standard patrol rotation. 8 checkpoints, 16 platforms, 4 maintenance corridors. I know the route by memory. I've walked it 1,000 times. At 0123 hours, I responded to a minor incident on Platform 7. A passenger had slipped on a wet patch near the platform edge. No injury, just a scare. I helped her up, filed a hazard report for the cleaning crew, and continued my patrol. At 0417 hours, I radioed control to report a malfunctioning emergency light in Corridor 3-A. Standard maintenance flag. Control logged it. At 0445 hours, I encountered a maintenance worker near an exposed electrical panel in the equipment room on sub-level 2. I issued a verbal warning about working near live circuits without proper PPE. He acknowledged and corrected the issue. Routine. Documented. Normal. At 0545 hours, I returned to the security office to complete my shift paperwork. I opened my locker to retrieve my jacket and bag. Inside, on top of my folded spare uniform, was a manila folder. I didn't recognize it. I hadn't placed anything in my locker that shift. I pulled it out and examined it. The folder was standard issue, the kind we use for incident reports. The label on the front read, Incident Report, Officer J. Walsh, date. Tuesday's date. Shift. 2200 hours. 0600 hours. My name. Today's date. My shift. I opened the folder. Inside was a completed incident report form, filled out in blue ink. The handwriting was mine. I recognized my own script immediately, the particular slant of my letters, the way I cross my T's. The report documented my entire shift. 0123 hours. Platform 7. Passenger slip incident. No injury. Wet floor flagged for cleaning. 0417 hours. Corridor 3-A. Emergency light malfunction. Maintenance notified. 0445 hours. Sub-level 2 equipment room. Electrical safety warning issued to maintenance worker. Compliance confirmed. Every detail was accurate. Every timestamp matched my shift log. But I hadn't written this report yet. I was about to write my shift summary, but I hadn't started, and this report was already completed. I turned the page. The report continued with entries I didn't remember. 0552 hours. Service Tunnel 9-E. Officer Walsh observed structural crack in tunnel ceiling approximately 40 feet from eastern access. Entered tunnel for closer inspection. 0558 hours. Officer Walsh failed to respond to radio check. Control initiated welfare call. 0604 hours. Officer Walsh failed to exit tunnel. Officer Ramirez dispatched to investigate. 0617 hours. Officer Ramirez entered service tunnel 9-E. No sign of Officer Walsh. Tunnel shows no structural damage. Search expanded. 0630 hours. Officer Walsh declared missing. Full search protocol initiated. As of this report, Officer Walsh remains unaccounted for. Last known location, service tunnel 9-E, sub-level 3. I stared at the report. My hands were shaking. I checked my watch. 0546 hours. According to the report, I would enter service tunnel 9-E in 6 minutes, and I wouldn't come out. I flipped to the last page of the report. At the bottom in my handwriting was a final note. If you are reading this, you are me. You found this report before it happened. You have a choice. Do not enter tunnel 9-E, the report will be wrong. Or enter the tunnel and let the report be right. Either way, something is already written, and I don't think we can erase it. J.W. I closed the folder slowly. My rational mind scrambled for explanations: prank, forgery, someone with access to my locker and my handwriting. But the details were too specific, the timestamps too accurate, and the handwriting. I'd written tens of thousands of reports in my career. I knew my own hand. This was mine. I looked at my watch again. 05:48 hours, 4 minutes. I had a choice. I could ignore the report. I could clock out, go home, let 05:52 hours pass without incident. The report would be wrong. I wouldn't go missing. I'd prove that the future could be changed. Or I could go to Service Tunnel 9-E. I could follow the script. I could confirm that the report was accurate. I don't know why I chose the second option. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the certainty in that final note. Something is already written. Maybe it was the terrifying realization that if the report existed before I'd written it, then my choice had already been made. At 05:50 hours, I left the security office and descended to Sub-Level 3. Service Tunnel 9-E was a maintenance access corridor, rarely used, running parallel to the Orange Line tracks. I'd inspected it maybe twice in my entire career. I reached the tunnel entrance at 05:51 hours. The door was marked, Service Tunnel 9-E, authorized access only. I scanned my badge. The lock disengaged. I pulled the door open. The tunnel extended ahead, dimly lit by overhead bulbs spaced every 20 feet. Concrete walls, steel support beams, the faint smell of oil and dust. Normal. I entered the tunnel. At 05:52 hours, the exact time recorded in the report, I saw it. A structural crack in the ceiling approximately 40 feet from the entrance, just as the report had described. I approached the crack. It was about 3 feet long, running diagonally across the concrete. Hairline, not immediately dangerous, but worth documenting. I pulled out my flashlight and examined the crack more closely. That's when I noticed something strange. The crack wasn't just a fracture in the concrete, it was opening, slowly, widening as I watched, as though something on the other side were pushing through. I stepped back. The crack spread further, branching into smaller fractures that spiderwebbed across the ceiling. Dust and small fragments of concrete began to fall. I keyed my radio. Control, this is Walsh. I'm in Service Tunnel 9-E. We have a structural issue, requesting immediate engineering assessment. Static. Control, do you copy? No response, just static. I looked up at the ceiling. The crack was now a foot wide, and through the gap I saw something. Not the Sub-Level 2 infrastructure, which should have been directly above, not piping or wiring or earth. Light. A pale, unnatural light like daylight, but wrong in color, too blue, too cold. I backed toward the tunnel entrance, flashlight still aimed at the crack. The gap widened further. Concrete fell in chunks now, crashing to the tunnel floor. And then, I saw movement. Something was descending through the crack, slowly, deliberately. A shape, dark, angular, mechanical or organic, I couldn't tell. It was lowering itself into the tunnel. Limbs or appendages or cables extending downward, finding purchase on the walls. I turned and ran toward the exit. The tunnel stretched ahead of me, the door visible maybe 40 feet away. I ran as fast as I could, boots pounding on the concrete, breath ragged. The door didn't get closer. I kept running. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The door remained the same distance away, as though the tunnel were extending with every step I took. I stopped, gasping for air, and looked back. The shape had fully descended. It was in the tunnel now, 20 feet behind me. Tall, maybe 12 feet, supported by multiple limbs that moved with insect-like precision. The surface of its body reflected the overhead lights in fragmented patterns, as though it were covered in mirrors or glass. It didn't move toward me, it just stood there, motionless, watching. I forced myself to turn away and walk toward the door. Not running this time. Walking. Steady. Methodical. The tunnel responded. The door grew closer. 10 feet. 5 feet. I reached it, grabbed the handle, pulled it open, and stumbled through. I slammed the door shut behind me and leaned against it, heart hammering. I was in a corridor. But not the sub-level 3 corridor I'd entered from. This corridor was different. Older, narrower, the walls bare brick instead of concrete. The lighting was dim, the bulbs old incandescent units casting a yellow glow. I walked down the corridor looking for a familiar landmark. After 50 feet, I reached a stairwell. I climbed it. 1 flight, 2 flights, 3. I emerged on a platform, deserted. The signage above read, Platform 22. There was no Platform 22 in Harbor Metro. The system only had 18 platforms. I stood there, disoriented, trying to understand what had happened. I'd entered Service Tunnel 9-E. I'd seen something impossible, and I'd exited into a part of the station that didn't exist. I pulled out my radio. Control, this is Walsh. I need immediate assistance. I'm on Platform 22. Do you copy? Static. Then faintly. Walsh, report, unscheduled, missing. The transmission was broken, garbled. I couldn't make out full sentences. And Control, repeat. I'm on Platform 22. I need extraction. The radio went silent. I walked the length of the platform, searching for an exit. There were stairs at the far end. I descended them, hoping they'd lead to a familiar area. They led to another platform. Platform 15. This one I recognized. I was back in the operational section of the station. I checked my watch. 06:35 hours. 43 minutes had passed since I'd entered Service Tunnel 9-E. I made my way back to the security office. Officer Ramirez was there, along with my supervisor and 2 other officers I didn't know well. They all turned when I entered. Ramirez's face went pale. Walsh, where the hell have you been? I was in Service Tunnel 9-E. There was a structural issue. I tried to radio control, but we've been searching for you for 40 minutes. I went into Tunnel 9-E. You weren't there. The tunnel was empty. No structural damage, no sign of you. I looked at my supervisor. I was there. I saw something. The ceiling cracked open. There was something coming through. My supervisor studied me carefully. Walsh, we inspected the tunnel. There's no damage, no cracks. Are you feeling all right? I pulled out the folder, the incident report, and handed it to him. This was in my locker before my shift ended. It describes everything that happened, including me going missing. He opened the folder and read the report. His expression didn't change. He closed the folder and handed it back to me. Walsh, this folder is empty. I opened it. Blank pages, no report, no handwriting, just empty forms. It was filled out, I said, in my handwriting. It described my entire shift. It said I'd go missing in Tunnel 9-E. My supervisor glanced at Ramirez, then back at me. I think you should take the rest of the week off. You've been working long shifts. Get some rest. I'm not imagining this. No one said you were. But you're clearly exhausted. Go home. We'll cover your shifts. I didn't argue. I clocked out, left the station, and drove home. The incident report was still in my locker when I checked the next day. Still blank. No writing. No evidence I'd ever filled it out. But I know what I saw. I know what I read. And I know that somewhere in a version of the station that overlaps with the one we operate in, there's a report with my name on it, documenting events that happened and didn't happen simultaneously. I still work at Harbor Metro. I still conduct patrols. But I don't go near Service Tunnel 9-E, and I don't open my locker until I'm ready to leave. because I'm afraid that one day I'll find another folder, another report, describing another shift, another disappearance. Some reports aren't meant to be read, they're meant to be lived. And once you've seen your future written in your own handwriting, you realize that choice is an illusion. The report already exists. The events are already documented, and the only thing left to decide is whether you'll follow the script or spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you had. Either way, the report is filed, the incident is logged, and somewhere in the infrastructure, in the tunnels and corridors that exist between what's supposed to be and what actually is, someone is writing the next entry. And it might be you, documenting your own disappearance before it happens, leaving a warning for the version of yourself that hasn't found it yet. The system keeps its records, and the records are always accurate, even when they're written in advance.